Thank you, Kate, for that introduction. Good afternoon and welcome everyone to today's presentations. My name, uh, I'm a Senior Community Development Special at ICF. I'll be serving as a co-host during today's presentation. So just to let you know, the slide deck has been posted online for the session today and is available now as we speak. So we'll drop a link to the slides in the chat box for reference so you can access that. All webinar materials, including the recording, will be posted on the HUD Exchange in the webinar archive and will be available within 1 to 2 weeks from today. You'll be able to locate that recording by searching through the archive and filtering by date or topic. So those links should be available in the chat. And please note, webinar attendance will be marked following the live webinar. Once attendance is marked, you can download the certificate by navigating to the HUD Exchange learning page. If prompted, log into your HUD Exchange account, and in the upper left-hand corner, as you'll see here in the screenshot, you can click the 3-line button to open the HUD Exchange Learning navigation menu. From there, you can click Certificates and Badges, which is also highlighted here in the bottom left portion of the screenshot. And you can locate today's training and then click PDF in the upper right-hand corner, and that'll let you download the certificate in PDF form into your computer. So now I'll introduce Jane Sharita, the Deputy Division Director at the Office of Outreach and Capacity Building.
Thank you so much, Lucas, and welcome everyone to today's webinar on connecting clients to healthy homes, resources, and tools. We are so pleased to partner with our colleagues in HUD's Office of Lead Hazard Control and Healthy Homes to provide you with key information on how to connect your clients with Healthy Homes programs that are designed to protect families from housing-related safety and health hazards. Today, we'll cover key topics related to lead-based paint, mold, radon, carbon monoxide, pests, thermal control, and injury prevention. So hopefully your clients don't have to deal with that, but if they do, we want you and them to be prepared. We'll also share information on community-based programs, grants, and resources available to mitigate or prevent hazards in the home. Finally, we'll review the HUD Healthy Housing Toolkit for housing counselors available on HUD Exchange. I'd like to now turn the presentation back to Lucas, who will run through the agenda and start our first poll question. Lucas?
Great. Thank you, Jane, for that introduction. So we'll go over the agenda a bit in more detail for what we'll cover today during the webinar. So a primary goal of today's webinar is to provide housing counselors with crucial information regarding the role on healthy homes topics and hazards, which Jane mentioned. So we'll go into those in detail. We'll also discuss healthy homes laws and regulations related to each health home hazard and share information intended to educate clients about those hazards. We'll share information related to actions that need to be taken to address each hazard in their home, in your client's home, and we'll discuss information about relevant community-based programs, including grants and resources available to mitigate or prevent hazards in the home. We'll also review additional resources, as Jane mentioned, including the Healthy Housing Toolkit for housing counselors to provide homeowners, home buyers, and renters with critical information necessary to maintain a healthy home. We'll also share the Housing Counseling Disaster Recovery Toolkit on the HUD Exchange, which will provide information on how to help clients navigate disaster recovery programs and address hazards that typically arise post-disaster. And intermittently throughout this presentation, as Jane mentioned, we'll present polling questions, pausing for time for participants to respond through Zoom. And as time allows, near the end of the presentation, we'll address questions and allow responses from each of today's presenters. So now let's discuss healthy homes topics and how they may intersect with the client work you do as a housing counselor. So housing counselors can play a key role in healthy homes topics, educating clients on the importance of maintaining a healthy home, and the simple steps that people can take to keep their families healthy and safe. So the topics we discuss today can inform the work you do while providing clients with home improvement and rehabilitation counseling, guiding clients through the process of rebuilding or maintaining their home or rental units, and ensuring a safe and habitable living condition. Additionally, pre-purchase counseling and homebuyer education You can share resources on healthy homes and hazards, topics, and regulations to help home buyers understand their rights as purchasers and their ongoing rights as responsibilities, or their ongoing responsibilities as property owners. So during rental counseling, housing counselors can inform renters of their rights that they have concerning healthy housing topics and help clients address hazards and understand how to report those hazards to their landlords. Additionally, the related resources and information shared today will inform the disaster preparation and mitigation work you do with clients to ensure they're able to navigate disaster recovery programs and address the hazards that typically arise post-disaster. So now let's turn to our first poll, which will appear on your screen shortly. So we'd like you to represent or to select the organization which you represent. So select if you're a local housing counseling agency or a sub-grantee or affiliate of an intermediary, or you can select if you're if you're with an intermediary such as a state housing finance agency or multi-state organization, or you can select if you're with another organization. So while we wait for everyone to complete the poll, I wanted to share a bit about my current role at ICF and my experience relevant to the housing counseling and healthy homes topics that we will discuss today. I've been at ICF for the past year, working on multiple HUD programs, including the development of various trainings with HUD's Office of Lead Hazard Control in Healthy Homes, or OLH CHH for short. So before I joined ICF, I worked at a HUD-approved housing counseling organization in New York City, partnering with a network of housing counseling and legal service organizations throughout the state, serving as a program manager on the Build It Back program in New York City. So while I was there, I provided technical assistance to housing counselors who assisted homeowners and tenants to help them recover from the devastation of Hurricane Sandy. And I also worked with housing counseling organizations, with our network of housing counseling organizations there to provide technical assistance to housing counseling organizations and legal service organizations to help homeowners that were at risk of default or foreclosure or displacement because of housing of financial hardship caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm excited to be here today and have another opportunity to connect with housing counselors, to aid you in your work, and to help link you to Healthy Homes resources and tools. So it looks like the polling is closed. So thanks everyone for your response. So it seems like 71% are with a local housing counseling agency or a sub-grantee or an affiliate of an intermediary. 7% are with an intermediary, including housing state finance agency or an MSO, and 22% selected others. So it's good to see we have a bit of a mix here. So now I'll turn the presentation over to Bruce Haber and Joe Miller from HUD's Office of Lead Hazard Control and Healthy Homes.
Well, thank you, Lucas. My name is Bruce Haber, and I'm with the Office of Lead Hazard Control and Healthy Homes. I'm based in Washington, D.C. I am the Division Director for the Program and Regulatory Support Division. And what we do is we offer a lot of consulting work to the general public and to assisted programs. We oversee the HUD Lead Safe Housing Rule, and we jointly enforce with the EPA the Federal Lead Disclosure Rule. So we get involved in quite a few cases across the country dealing with lead and with healthy homes issues. And then with that short introduction, I'd like to now turn it over to Jo Miller and let her introduce herself.
Thanks, Bruce. I'm Jo Miller, and I also work for the Lead Hazard Control Office, the Healthy Homes and Lead Hazard Control. And we at the office do offer a lot of funding. We'll be telling you a little bit more about that. I have been working in lead hazard control and healthy homes for a long time. I came to the office in 2022. But prior to that, I worked for a lead hazard control program. I started out as a neighborhood coordinator and in Minneapolis and going out into the community and worked with a lot of housing counselors at that time. And then I became a consultant and worked with programs all around the country. And during that time, I actually worked with my local housing counselors and my local Catholic charities on a variety of different grant programs around housing. And when I worked with those housing counselors, I want to tell you, they were the ones that were fighting for resources and working with the COCs and working with some of our CDBG funds and programs. And so I know that they are advocates for our communities, and I appreciate all the work that you guys do. And I'm really excited to share the resources that we have today. And I know that you carry these messages to your clients, and I'm grateful for that. So we're really delighted to be able to bring this to you. Next slide, please. All right. So I'm going to share a few things about what it is that we mean when we talk about healthy homes. We have 8 principles of a healthy home. And when we talk about clean, when we talk about the 8 principles of a healthy home, we're thinking dry, well ventilated, pest-free, safe, clean, well-maintained, and contaminant-free and thermally controlled. And what do we mean by that? So when we think about keeping it dry, we mean preventing water from entering into the home. Entering into your home, a client's home, through leaks, roof systems. When we think about like rainwater coming in, do you have good drainage away from the house? Are you checking your plumbing for any types of leaks? By clean, we mean, are you looking at sources of dust or contaminants? Do you have clean surfaces that you can wipe down? Are you reducing clutter? And can you use effective cleaning methods? What we mean by that is wet methods. And we do have some how-tos in the toolkit that is provided to you with this presentation. The next principle that we have is keeping it safe. And what we mean by that is, storing poisons out of the reach of children and properly labeling them, securing loose rugs, which can be trip hazards, keeping children's play areas free from sharp surfaces, installing and checking on your smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, and keeping fire extinguishers on hand. There's a lot of things that go way beyond that. Those are some of the key ones that we look at. The 4th principle is keeping it well ventilated. And what do we mean by ventilation? It's bringing in air into a home. So having ventilated bathrooms and kitchens, and using whole home ventilation for fresh supply to reduce the concentration of contaminants in the home. We also want to make sure that we're keeping it pest-free. So pests look for food, they look for shelter, they look for water. So sealing cracks and openings throughout the home, storing food in pest-resistant containers can reduce the attracting pests. And if needed, using sticky traps and baits, and along with low toxic pesticides like borax powder, and making sure that you're keeping pets and children away from any type of pesticide that you might use that could be toxic. You want to keep it contaminant free. And as you heard, our office is the Office of Lead Hazard Control. So lead is a big focus for our office. So reducing lead related hazards, lead paint, lead dust. In pre-78 housing, we do talk a lot about pre-78 housing because lead was supposedly taken out of paint in 1978. Some of that lead paint was still around, but that's really, when you look at pre-78 housing, that's what our focus. And so looking at fixing deteriorated paint, protecting yourself when you are disturbing or the client is disturbing deteriorated paint, and knowing what a lead safe work practice is, and keeping floors and windows clean, and using, again, those wet cleaning approaches so you aren't disturbing dust and creating more of a hazard. You also want to test your home for radon, and Bruce will be covering a little bit more about that. That is a dangerous gas that can enter the home, and keeping your home well maintained. So inspect it, clean it, repair it routinely. A lot of times, if we aren't looking for those things, some small problem that isn't maintained can become a bigger problem pretty quickly. All right, next slide, please.
Sure. So before we go to the next slide, we have a polling question here that we'd like to cover. So we'll pop that up here in Zoom. So we'd like to know what healthy home topic is the most prevalent in your area. So which one of the topics that's listed here that Joe had covered is the most prevalent in your area? And you can select multiple options here. So feel free to vote, and we'll take a brief moment just to make sure that everybody has a chance to vote on the polling question.
And while that's happening, I realized that I didn't cover thermally controlled. And you know, that's one of my favorites, right? Like this to talk about. And thermal control is such a big issue right now. So while you're looking at that, not to influence anyone, but with our issue of heat right now, extreme heat, we'll be talking about that a little bit later too. But thermal control is incredibly important, whether it's, control when we have blizzards and cold events, or like we're having right now, extreme heat events, being able to keep your home controlled and safe. When we have people that are have COPD, asthma, are vulnerable, it can be life and death. So thermal control also impacts, mold and moisture. We want to make sure that we are able to control the temperatures within our home.
Great, thank you. So we should see the results come up here. So mold and moisture is really high up on the list, followed by pests, lead-based paint hazards, and home safety and injury prevention. So it seems like these are all concerns. So I'm really glad that we're able to cover all these topics and discuss client education around each one of those topics. So I'll move to the next slide, and we'll have a pause for brief polling after that as well.
Terrific. Thank you. All right. Well, as you can, next slide, please. So as you can see here, we have housing problems. I'm going to go across this slide quickly. We have housing problems that lead to hazards. And these hazards, let's talk about lead-based paint. Lead-based paint, we have lead in the home, the paint deteriorates. Because of the deterioration, we have children in the home and they're exposed to lead dust, which causes lead poisoning. The lead poisoning, the health effects of that can be a variety of different health problems, from high blood pressure, brain damage, reduced IQ, behavior problems, disabilities. And then we move on to the economic impacts of that, which can be school absenteeism. We have academic failure, dropout. We can have lack of employment where they aren't able to keep employment, lifelong health problems. We see, again, back to high blood pressure, lead impacts every organ of the body besides the lungs. And we see lifelong health problems with lead exposure. And then, of course, social problems. And we do see, because of the way that lead impacts the brain, we do see a correlation between lead exposure and a criminal record. So you can see the impact on society as a whole when we have a housing problem like lead. We can say the same thing about, radon exposure. If you have radon exposure, it can lead to cancer. Radon is it is the second leading cause of lung cancer, and the cost for healthcare, hospitalization, missing work, loss of life is incredible. And the same is true when we look at things like electrical fires, hazards. When we have these kind of unintentional injuries, they can be devastating to families and very difficult sometimes to overcome. People end up being bankrupt and losing everything. So when we have a housing problem that's not being taken care of, we can lose everything. When we're able to take care of those things, go through these things and use our resources to address these things early enough, we can solve a lot of problems for that individual, for that family, for the community, and for society as a whole.
Thank you, Joe. So yeah, now we'll go over to the third polling question here. We'd like to talk about how familiar you are with today's Healthy Homes topic. So whether you're very familiar, not at all, or if you're somewhat familiar with the topics, please select a choice here and we'll look at the results and move over to Bruce, who will be presenting on lead-based paint hazards.
Thank you, Lucas. While everybody's doing that, and we can see people are somewhat knowledgeable about some of these. And these are a lot of topics we've already quickly addressed, but I want to go back to lead-based paint specifically. And to start off with, lead is a naturally occurring element. It's found in a lot of minerals. It's found in our soil. It's used in a lot of different locations, both in the past and still today. But we do tend to talk about lead hazards in our home, which are primarily due to the presence of lead-based paint. And as the lead-based paint deteriorates, it forms paint chips, which get to the floor, which get ground into the dust, which end up going into the soil, causing contamination around our house. But paint is not the only place that lead can be found in our house. There's lead in water, which can be an issue nowadays. There is lead in some consumer products. You see a lot of product recalls. Most recently, some kind of water bottle that had lead on it. And so it is around us, but we're primarily interested in lead-based paint because it's been shown that the majority of lead exposure to the most susceptible people, which are children, is lead paint in the home. And that can result in what we call an elevated blood lead level, or the Center for Disease Control and Prevention calls a blood lead reference value, which is a level of blood lead of called 3.5 micrograms. So that's millionths of a gram per deciliter of blood. And it's at this level that the Center for Disease Control and Prevention has determined that they recommend an environmental investigation of a home to figure out where the exposure is coming from. And that's because there is no safe level of lead in the blood. And children are most susceptible because their bodies are growing. They're incorporating everything into the growth of their body, including their brain, their muscles, their bones. And the body doesn't know what to do with the lead, so it just incorporates it in different parts of the body. And as Joe pointed out, this can result in a lot of long-term health hazards, neurological problems, and many other things like that. So there is no safe level for blood. We do have a standard that we begin the investigation process, which is 3.5 micrograms per deciliter, as I mentioned. And this is most commonly found in pre-1978 housing because lead-based paint for residential use was banned in 1978. And you may have heard that lead-based paint was banned. That's not true. Lead-based paint is still sold today, but it's not sold for residential use. So you're not going to be putting it on your walls and ceilings unless you specifically go out to buy leaded paint, such as artist paint or road marking paint or anti-fouling paint for boats and stuff that might still have lead in it. So because lead-based paint was banned in 1978, the rules around it tend to use that date as a cutoff. If a house was built after 1978, it's considered lead-based paint free. If a house was built before 1978, it might have lead-based paint, so certain rules could apply, including anytime that renovation is done in a pre-78 home, there is a requirement that the contractor doing the work, maybe not dressed up like this guy is, but that they will be having to do the work in a lead-safe manner. If we go on to the next slide, please, we can talk a little bit about how the intersection of the counseling, what you do can really help your people that call in for help. And when you think about it, when they're buying a home or they're renting a home and the home was built before 1978, there is a requirement, the federal lead disclosure rule, that requires the provision from the owner to the tenant or to the buyer of any information that they happen to have about lead in the home. We also have the federal lead safe housing rule, and this applies to assisted housing where HUD is assisting it, such as public housing or project-based rental assistance or tenant-based rental assistance. And for HUD, we require a little bit more than the rest of the unassisted housing in that we require testing or perhaps a visual observation. And then finally, we have the renovation, repair, and painting rule, and this governs any kind of renovation that goes on in pre-1978 housing, unless you know that the housing is lead-based paint free or the work that you're doing does not involve lead-based paint. We're going to talk real briefly about the different resources that are available and the disclosure form, and then what perhaps a lot of your callers or people that you talk to might be interested in are the grant opportunities available in that area that can help them address lead-based paint. Next slide, please. So these are the basic federal lead regulations. There's the lead disclosure rule, which is a joint HUD and EPA rule and requires the disclosure of any known lead-based paint or lead-based paint hazards in housing, as well as a warning statement and the Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home pamphlet. This pamphlet is the same pamphlet that's given out in a lot of HUD programs as part of the educational process to address lead-based paint. And it's one of the tools that you as a housing counselor can really use to help pass along information about lead-based paint. Then we have the HUD Lead Safe Housing Rule, and this applies to federally assisted housing. So if it's a HUD assisted housing, there are certain requirements that would apply if it was built before 1978 and it's not otherwise exempt. Then we have the EPA Renovation, Repair, and Painting Rule. This applies equally across the board, whether you're assisted or not, and it covers the renovation work. And it's designed so that the contractor sets up a safe working area, they do their work safely, and they clean up afterwards. And then finally, we have the Lead Activities Rule. This governs, this is an EPA rule, which is oftentimes relegated or delegated to states, and it oversees who can conduct lead-based paint inspections, who does risk assessments, who can do abatement, a very specialized type of construction, and who does clearances. Next slide, please. So I want to go back to the Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home pamphlet. This is part of the disclosure rule, and this is a very useful piece of information that can be sent to people calling in for information about lead. This is about 15 to 20 pages long. It goes through lead and paint, lead and water, and other sources of lead. It's required to be provided as part of the lead disclosure rule when you're leasing or buying housing built before 1978. It's available on both the HUD websites and also the EPA lead websites. Pretty easy to get to, epa.gov/lead, HUD.gov/lead, and you'll be able to eventually find this pamphlet on those web pages. Next slide. So in HUD assisted programs, we have requirements for lead-based paint inspections or lead-based paint risk assessments or visual assessments, depending on the level of assistance that's happening. A lead-based paint inspection is by far the most useful piece of information a homeowner or any other tenant will ever get. It is a surface-by-surface testing of all the painted surfaces, and it tells you that it is lead or it's not lead. And that will give you an inventory of where the lead-based paint is so that when you do renovations, you can do it lead safe when you're working on or around lead-based paint. A risk assessment is different than a lead-based paint inspection in that it does not test every single painted surface. It only tests deteriorated painted surfaces to see if they have lead in it. But then it also does dust testing throughout the home and soil sampling of any bare soil to see and compare those results to see whether they're considered elevated or not. And that will tell you if you have a deteriorated lead-based paint, you have a dust lead hazard, or you have a soil lead hazard. And the final type of evaluation is just a visual assessment. This is used to look at your house, to look around, to determine if there's any deteriorated paint. And there's no testing involved. It's just looking for chips and cracks and places where the paint has deteriorated, fallen on the ground, gotten ground up into dust, which then could easily get onto a young child's hands and cause them to have lead exposure. Next slide, please. So I think, Joe, you wanted to talk about these funding opportunities, right? Or do you want me to go through them?
You know, I love talking about funding opportunities, so I'm going to go through these here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, awesome. So our office, if you're watching this live, our Office of Lead Hazard Control and Healthy Homes just announced over $500 million in funding available for healthy homes. The first one that we announced was the Lead Hazard Control grant opportunity, which has healthy home supplemental funding available. We do have a lead hazard control capacity building grant, which I have up here on this slide. And this is exciting. And one of the reasons why I have this to start with to talk to you about is that this is an incredibly flexible grant program. And any community that is looking at building a lead hazard control healthy homes grant program should be looking at this. It is the opportunity to build a workforce, to get community health workers, lead abatement contractors, as Bruce had mentioned, that you need to work in your community, to get figure out how to get your COC, your housing counselors, your nonprofits, your Tech University, get all of these groups working together to have a strong program to address lead and healthy homes within your community and privately owned rental and owner occupied units. So it's a great program where the first 2 years you're building coalition, building a workforce. The last year you're producing units is usually the process. Next slide, please. And of course next slide, please. We're happy to answer any questions about if you have any questions about these grants, please reach out to us. The next, thank you, slide. Of course, I talked about the lead hazard control grant too. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. We do want to tell you about, the grants that we have. We also, again, have our healthy housing, and we have our healthy housing supplemental funds that go with our lead hazard control grants. These, again, are addressing those 8 principles of healthy homes. Many of you talked about your concern for mold, and that is one of probably the most common issues that we hear about when we're out in the communities, when we're out at conferences, and it is a difficult one to address. We do come back to that ventilation. That is one of the best ways to keep it dry, keep it maintained, keep the ventilation, reduce the infiltration of moisture. We have resources within all of these grants to help to reduce the presence of mold, but also to prevent it. Next slide, please. So you want to educate your clients about radon. All of our grants do address radon, our lead hazard control grants, our healthy homes grants. We do want to make sure that people are testing for radon. We have resources here about radon. You see our radon page there linked out. There are regulations. There's a new radon policy that HUD put out. And we do want to make sure that you are talking to people and you understand there's a map of radon risks that we have in the information in there. Radon is the 2nd leading cause of lung cancer. And it is a huge health issue, but an easy to solve health issue. So again, you won't know that it's in your home. It is a radioactive gas that cannot be seen, it cannot be smelled, and there is an easy solution. So please talk to your clients about this. And if they need resources, our office is available to provide those resources, and we're able to answer questions. Next slide, please. All right. Carbon monoxide. You've probably heard about it before, of course, and you want to be able to talk to your clients about that. Again, another odorless, invisible gas. It's common in household appliances, and it is unfortunately something that we see. About 14,000 people are hospitalized every year due to carbon monoxide poisoning, and about 400 people in the United States die every year from carbon monoxide poisoning. More than 100,000 people visit the emergency room every year due to carbon monoxide poisoning. Making sure that they have carbon monoxide detectors in their home, making sure they know where to put those carbon monoxide detectors, and that they are tested on a regular basis. Next slide, and I'm going to pass this over to Bruce.
Ooh, and I get to talk about pests. Sometimes it's icky science. Things like mice, roaches, bed bugs, other pests, and these can trigger asthma and other health problems, which, and Joe mentioned others, we're having kind of a heat thing right now. So it's hot, it's dry, the house has mice or roaches or other kind of pests, and so their antigen gets into the dust. It becomes an issue and can result in asthma cases, hospitalizations, missed work. So we generally try to educate clients about how to prevent it. So you try to keep mice and rats out of the house by securing the outside. Inside the house, if you have exposure because of cockroaches or bed bugs, you try to use integrated pest management. It's a less poisonous pesticide application, and it's going after the specific pests. You don't go in there with indiscriminate spraying, which then gets, think about in the past, we used to set off pest bombs, which do a good job killing things in the carpet, but chases other things back into the walls, which then they just come back out. But when you come back in, it's not all that good for you because the pesticide is killing pests. It's probably not good for you either. So for the counselors, this is where you get to refer to the Healthy Homes checklists. You can discuss the types of hazards, discuss what integrated pest management is, and also hopefully find some local resources, which surprisingly, a lot of local health departments will be able to advise homeowners and tenants about ways that they can address these things. There's not a lot of regulatory support, but there is new under the national standards for the physical inspection of real estate that HUD has out. We do have a section on pest infestation. And so in HUD assisted units, they are being looked at. There is some resources about on the Inspire standard. There's also a safe pest control pamphlet. And I see a question about diatomaceous earth. That's not good in open spaces. It can be used in enclosed spaces. That borax powder can also. But diatomaceous earth is very dangerous to inhale. And so, I just happened to see the question, but it's not something that you want to use. And so it can be used inside like electrical outlets or behind baseboards or in other cavities where insects would crawl through them. The very fine diatomaceous earth gets in between the joints in their keratin shells, and it irritates them to the point of getting rid of them. But don't spread it around your house. Not a good thing. So there's a lot of ways that you can go with pest control, and that kind of leads pretty good into other hazards, injury prevention, because we're talking about pests. And I love this picture of a child getting hold of that spray bottle, and the question is, what's in it? So there are a bunch of different typical, there's accidents, fires, drownings, and other poisonings that happen in the house. A lot of it's pretty much common sense. You don't think about it, but there are issues such as loose railings and trip hazards that many people don't think about in their own house, but you can discuss with them about having what kind of walking surface they have, if they have stairs, do they have loose runners, do they have loose railings. You can use the Office of Housing Counseling Toolkit to review the common hazards and discuss practices for avoiding the hazards. Usually, again, talking about regulations, it's local code. If it's a rental property, there could be code enforcement for the landlord to fix things that are broken. And then we do have the Healthy Homes home safety handout. And then there's the next slide is, this is, Joe, I'm going to turn it back to you because again, this is money. This is, where do I find help when I have home safety hazards and I'm getting ready to retire?
Yes, we're excited about this program. We've already had it for a couple of years. Same with our capacity building grant, the Office of Lead Hazard Control and Healthy Homes, far beyond lead hazard control. We started there, and we are a whole home approach and a whole people approach. Our older adult home modification program enables low-income elderly adults to stay in their home. We have high impact modifications for people to be able to stay safely within their home. We do have, the program includes having an occupational therapist either on staff or on contract with either it could be a nonprofit, it could be as far as the applicant, nonprofit or local government, public housing authorities, and Indian housing authorities are able to apply for these grants and bring them into their communities. It's a great resource. We've had an incredible success rate with these grants and made a huge impact in communities. So please know that this is a great resource for making homes healthy and safe for the elders in your community. Next slide, please. Perfect. Educating your clients about hazards around thermal control. Again, you're seeing this in the news right now. We want to make sure that you know that there are a lot of resources. HUD is taking this seriously, not just our office. There are resources on extreme heat. HUD has a page on extreme heat. There's heat.gov that has come out where all of the federal government is coming together on providing resources out there. There's a lot of tax information and grants and resources. Again, our lead hazard control with the Healthy Home Supplemental Funding, our older adult home modification program, our Healthy Homes program, all of those do consider thermal control as part of healthy homes. People are unfortunately getting very ill and unfortunately dying. So we want to make sure that people are able to control their wellness and keep their homes safe. So please let them know that this is a serious event. More people die within their home during these high heat events than they do outside. You think it's people walking around outside or playing or working outside. If you go to the National Weather Service and you look at their statistics on death, it is people in their homes, because the most vulnerable people are staying in home. They're not in their home. They're not out there being active. And unfortunately, they don't find a cool place. They don't leave. So please let people know there are resources for them. Thank you.
So thank you, Joe, and thank you, Bruce. You both covered a lot of great information on home health hazards, regulations, and resources, which will be invaluable to housing counselors and their client work. So next, we'll take a look at some additional resources that were referenced today and go into those a little bit more in depth. So the first resource we want to review is the Healthy Housing Toolkit for housing counselors. So you might be familiar with the toolkit, which was recently revamped and developed cooperatively between the Office of Housing Counseling and OLHCHH. So as housing counselors, you'll need to think about your client's specific educational needs around healthy housing to guide homeowners, buyers, and renters through the process of ensuring they're living in a healthy home. So this toolkit contains 6 separate sections, including an introduction on healthy homes topics, rules, principles, resources. It also includes a section on that introduction also includes a section on post-disaster guidance that you can share with your clients. And the middle sections contain checklists for educating each type of client, so home buyers, homeowners, and renters on those healthy home topics. And the last section is new to the toolkit here. It contains a room-by-room checklist for establishing healthy home assessment protocols with clients. So let's go through each section in depth. So this first section, like I mentioned, this is the introduction. So it provides you with overview on your role of educating clients in healthy homes topics like Bruce and Joe shared. The section provides details to inform the approach that housing counselors will take when educating clients about those topics. And again, that varies if your client is a renter, a home buyer, or a homeowner. So the introduction also references the Everyone Deserves a Safe and a Healthy Home booklet. So you can share that booklet with clients. It also references the Stakeholder Guide, which we'll discuss in a bit more detail. That's for housing counselors and that want to benefit from a more in-depth look at healthy home hazards. So we'll move on to the next few sections of the toolkit here. So sections 2 through 4 of the toolkit, those contain the checklists that Bruce and Joe referenced. So you can walk clients, whether they're home buyers, homeowners, or renters, through those hazards, check off the applicable section, and make sure that you're able to address each hazard with those clients. So the guidance, it starts off with lead-based paint hazards. As you learned today, that is a big topic. And so the first page of the checklist is actually dedicated to lead-based paint hazards. And that references the Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home pamphlet, which Bruce referenced earlier. And it also includes that overview of renovation, repair, and painting protocols, and a link to the EPA's Locating a Certified Firm site so that you can locate lead-based paint professionals in your area. The second page of the checklist contains guidance on educating clients on the principles of healthy homes hazards, and it contains informational pamphlets, which Bruce and Joe shared. So every topic has an informational pamphlet created by the Office of Healthy Homes and Lead Hazard Control for each of those hazard types. And section 5 of the toolkit, you'll find a list of Healthy Homes resources that are available in other languages, such as the PYF pamphlet, those informational flyers on each Healthy Homes topic, and additional HUD resources. And this last section of the toolkit, so this is section 6, it provides a room-by-room checklist of a home, and it provides a cross-section of a home here. So you see here, number 1, it listed is the living, dining room, and family rooms. In the image here, you'll see that that points to that room, and it highlights the various hazards. So I'll do a quick screen share of this section just so everybody's able to take a look. So here you'll see this is the table of contents. So it'll be pretty simple. You can select section 6. This will take you down to the checklist, the room by room checklist, and I'll just scroll through it really quickly, but you can walk clients through each room in their home, so you can check this off. It makes it a little bit easier to discuss hazards. And so it is broken down by 10 specific rooms, and then number 11 here, these are general considerations to take into account. And the final page here is this room by room for a healthy home image here. So you'll see here, these are the key, this is the key that references each one of those topics and the rooms that are related. So next, we will move on to the Housing Counseling Disaster Recovery Toolkit. So housing counseling agencies can play a significant role after disaster by helping clients navigate disaster recovery programs and by providing information on how to address hazards that typically arise post-disaster. So for example, clients might need some support in addressing mold in their homes, in hiring appropriate contractors, and in following safe work practices for reconstruction. So the link to that toolkit is dropped into the chat. So next we'll discuss another checklist here that's available for disaster recovery here. So when rebuilding a healthy home, housing counselors can help clients address post-disaster hazards that we've discussed in depth today by reviewing the checklist, which is titled the Counseling for Healthy Homes After a Disaster checklist. This will walk clients through key considerations when rebuilding a safe and healthy home. So this checklist is located on the Operating Post-Disaster page of the Housing Counseling Disaster Recovery Toolkit site under the Rebuilding Process section. So from there, you'll want to go to the Rebuilding a Healthy Home section, and you can find the checklist there, which Chris had dropped in the chat. Lastly, just wanted to share on this disaster recovery portion that housing counselors are encouraged to review the resources that are on this checklist. It includes a guide to post-disaster restoration for a safe and healthy home. There you'll find a 12-page brochure, and that has consumer tips for post-disaster home restoration. The checklist itself references those tips and includes information on how clients can safely enter a home following a disaster. It describes precautions to take before initiating any repair work. So you'll want to walk clients through each section of that checklist, and that will really help guide them on the process for assessing damages, health hazards, provide those tips for engaging professionals where appropriate. And there you can also share additional resources related to post-disaster recovery. So next, we wanted to encourage housing counselors to utilize the OLHCHH website here, which Chris, thanks for dropping that in the chat. So this website, if you select OLHCHH grantee contact list, which is highlighted here, that site will go to a spreadsheet which contains, I believe it's a PDF of a spreadsheet, which contains a list of grantees, organizational points of contact in your area, and the respective grant programs that Joe and Bruce discussed earlier today. So that's how you can find a grantee in your area and connect them to your clients. So the last resource we wanted to share here is the Everyone Deserves a Safe and Healthy Homes Guide. So I mentioned earlier, but there are 2 versions of this guide. So there's the Consumer Action Guide. That's that's shorter. It's targeted to the general public. It'll be very useful in sharing with your clients and working with them. It's written in user-friendly language. It provides a snapshot of the major categories of healthy homes hazards that we discussed earlier today. It offers tips for clients that have limited resources, and it focuses on children's health. So the stakeholder guide, that's a little bit different. That offers a deeper level of information for various stakeholders that may be involved in creating healthy homes, and that includes housing counselors. So you'll want to read this guide. It's more for your own information, and it's much more detailed than the consumer action guide. So I really hope that these resources will be helpful to you in your client work. And I just want to say thanks again, Bruce and Joe, for providing that overview. So with the last few minutes, we will spend a few minutes jumping over to any questions from the Q&A box. So we'll take a look at that. I'll put myself on mute. And if there are any outstanding questions, Bruce and Joe, we can get to those.
There was one question about there being an updated toolkit, and I was going to say, yes, there is. So that goes along with another question I saw come in while you were speaking, but the toolkit not having a section 6. Well, the new toolkit does have a section 6, which has the checklists, and it's available at Exchange. If you want, I can post it into the Q&A panel if, Chris, you haven't done that yet.
So Tammy has here posted the disaster recovery toolkit that we shared. And Chris, I believe, posted the Healthy Housing Toolkit for Housing Counselors site. So that is also available. I can repost that if that's helpful.
And if we still have time, I'd love to go back and talk a little bit about mold. If you could go back just real quickly to slide 18.
Slide 18? Sure,
Yeah.
I'll go.
It shows a very interesting phenomena that happens as we make our housing tighter, more energy efficient. One of the things that, and long before I joined HUD, I did many, many inspections for mold and moisture. And in this slide number 18, it shows a window. It's a new window. It's a double pane, energy efficient, and there's mold all over the windowsill. And there's condensation on the window itself. And one of the things that when I was doing home inspections and people were complaining about mold, and it was particularly after we had done, I worked for a housing authority, and we had done energy improvements. We'd made things more efficient. We put in nice new windows. And so they didn't leak all that air. And Joe mentioned about, keeping the air fresh. As we tighten up our houses with new insulation, more energy efficient doors, more energy efficient windows, the natural moisture that's in the home can accumulate. It doesn't leak out. And that can cause condensation. If you think about it, and I used to use this explanation when I was talking to clients, that when you take a glass of ice water and set it on the table, you see condensation all over the outside of the glass. The glass is not leaking. It's just the temperature difference in the humidity is condensing on the glass, causing moisture then to drip down. And that's what's happening on this window. And you might get calls about mold and moisture in a home. And if you can discuss about condensation, humidity, in the wintertime, if you vent the dryer into the house, you're going to have elevated humidity levels. And if the windows are tight, not letting the air to escape, then you're going to end up with condensation problems. And this can happen in summer and winter. And it's just one of the side effects of becoming more energy efficient. So I thought I'd just point that out since we had a little time.
Great. Thank you, Bruce. So That is very helpful. We do have a few minutes, and I think we have one last question. I will jump over to the pests. So there was a question if there's an agency that helps with bed bugs. So the toolkit does have a link to that pamphlet that talk about pests and how to find professional assistance and provide tips. So I think that would be a great resource. Bruce, I'm not sure if there's anything else you'd like to mention on that. Otherwise, I think that's it for the.
I would say we used to have a contract with stoppest.org. And that's a good site to go to. But our contract with them to provide assistance to HUD assisted properties, so basically consulting, it's expired. But their webpage, it's stoppests.org. It still has great information for bed bugs, for rodents, for other information and stuff like that. So that is probably one of the best places. Another place to talk to about bed bugs would be the local health department. They may have some resources or be able to point you to a pest management firm that actually does a decent job with bed bugs.
And sometimes your
Thank you, Bruce.
your extension program at your local university is also a good resource.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Like I said, I have an Ohio State card up on the wall here with all the different pests.
Yes.
Well, thank you both for that detailed information. I'm going to navigate to the last slide here. So Chris shared that resource that Bruce mentioned, stoppest.org, and I dropped the link in the chat because I think some people were having issues with locating the toolkit that has this updated toolkit. So I dropped that in the chat. It has that section 6 that we went over with the room by room checklist. So since we only have a few minutes left, I just wanted to sincerely thank all the presenters today, and share some additional information here. So you can refer to the HUD Exchange Housing Counseling page for additional information. If you have any inquiries on topics related to the webinar today, you can also send an email to housing.counseling@hud.gov. And we've put a link here where you can search for HUD approved housing counseling agencies. So I think with that, we are at time. So and Joe mentioned to reach out if your community wants to learn more about those additional funds and resources. So thank you so much for joining the webinar today. We really appreciate it. And yeah, stay in touch and use those resources. Thank you again for attending.